Hey, how's it going? New video for you guys today. What I wanted to talk about was is isn't is not okay. Zero. Whether or not zero actually exists. And the reason why this came about is because I saw a clip of young Sheldon where he says zero doesn't exist and then quotes Greek philosopher Parmenides supposedly saying, okay, I hope I said the philosopher's name right. I don't really remember, but like, yeah, it was like Parmenides or some shit like that. But anyway, essentially, he said that, quoting what he said, um, nothing cannot exist because to speak of something is to speak of something that exists. But then, doesn't that also kind of refute itself? Because if that being said, we use it as a justification for zero not existing, kind of like talking about something, we're talking about zero, right? So if we're discussing it, then zero has to exist. Nothing has to exist, essentially. And then it kind of got me thinking about like numbers in general, quote unquote, because when we think of our lives, we kind of see it through this, like, sequence and shit. How old we are, how long it's been, how many fucking minutes, hours, days, whatever, all that kind of shit, and then it's all moving forward. But then we can also kind of think of zero as like a placeholder, something that allows for something to exist. Because when you think of amounts, when you have nothing, it has to become something, I guess. And then you get one, and then you get two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, 11, 12, yeah, and then so on and so forth. And then it keeps going. But then there are also ideas, in terms of like negative numbers, negative one, negative two, negative three, negative four. So then all of a sudden, can we assume that life never existed the further back we go? Because if numbers can only go forward infinitely, how are we even going to talk about numbers going, the opposite direction? And in an infinite fashion, in terms of numbers being like endless, then we have to realize that we exist in a form of existence and then non-existence, because because there's nothing, and then you start with zero, and then you come up with ideas, you come up with something, sequences one after the other. You realize that everything is built on a house of cards, and everything, is truly meaningless and doesn't actually matter. Humanity's garbage too, but that aside, that is the only reason why we have the need and ideas to like project something. I think people miss the entire, like, the entirety of the equation when they say, oh, there's so much meaning to be found everywhere. Or you have to find your meaning because meaning has to be personal and set to you. But I mean, fuck that. They're only thinking about everything going forward, but then just as much as everything can go forward, everything can go backwards, right? And then you have all the negative numbers that essentially point to nothing. So at best, you can say there are meanings and there are no meanings. But how do you justify meanings without the nothingness in place to think that, oh, you have your meaning, even if you want to define that meaning for yourself? You simply cannot. So you have to be playing make believe. You have to be playing make believe because in order for something to keep going forward, it has to keep being added on. It has to be placed layers upon layers upon layers. But when we consider the fact that things are going forward for things that are infinitely also going backwards, that means we have to constantly project meaning, interpretations, and like all of that ambiguity. Because ambiguity only comes from adding more than what we think we know, right? And that's essentially positive numbers going forward. But always going back negative, it's just thinking it remains the same. It constantly remains more negative. But the essential of the fact that like it's nothing and it's basically, will always be the same. You just have more of the same thing that's nothing. But when you keep going more and more and more towards, let's say, meaning, purpose, all of these kinds of things, like a certain sort of amount, you have to distinguish one from two, two from three, three from four, three, four from five, like all this sort of stuff. You have to go through the lens of like mental gymnastics. But with nothingness, you already understand it. And you just see the arbitrary notion of like, oh, yeah, there's more of nothing, even though nothing remains the same. But if there's more of something positive, oh, you have to know. Let's say there are, this is one can. If I add another one, it's two. And then it's like, I have to hold these ideas, force them to have some sort of like, consistency. But the thing with like negativity and stuff like that, and the numbers going like, you know, even further back, I don't have to do that, and I still accept that it's the same because it remains the same, and that it's nothing still. So, in conclusion, this life is stupid, and it's made up, and it's false, and it's a fantasy. And the only thing that I've concluded truly from this existence is that everything is mental masturbation. Everything is mental masturbation to prevent us from either our natural cause of death or getting us to just, you know, bite the bullet and kill ourselves, which we will always do technically. Because when we think about death in terms of like that always remains the same, regardless of like what we do. So your meaning, your purpose, your strive, and like your fucking self-identity and like all this sort of shit, like it's made up. Just how like somebody had to make this can, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It has no inherent reason to exist. Somebody had to craft it this way. Somebody had to put the design, whatever, all that kind of shit. The thing that I'm wearing, somebody had to place this fucking, you know, yellow speck here from all the, you know, redness all over here. And you know, all these fucking ideas. But when we say nothing, we just keep talking about nothing. We're not talking about anything. When we talk about things, we're trying to talk about things that only exist coming from nothing. So there are projections and our you know, ideas of shit, but that's all it is, conceptualization. Just because you can, you know, invent all these random arbitrary things, that doesn't mean you're actually doing anything. That to me is mental masturbation. People might say that philosophy is mental masturbation because, oh, you're not actually doing anything, blah, 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 this and this and that. But it's just like the fact that you insist that you have to do something, even though everything already naturally exists in terms of like not actually needing to happen, that is you forcing, I don't know, your need to exist when the fact that you exist is just from pure coincidence. Nothingness, negative numbers going all the way back. Let's say before the Big Bang, there was essentially nothing. Before the explosion or like whatever, it was all essentially nothing. So, you know, the fact that nothingness can continue to forever exist even though we already have a conceptualization of like an idea here that we keep going forward, generations to come, life, meaning, purpose, whatever. All these different like random ideologies that like we're, I don't know, pulling out of our ass. It will never erase nothing. Because nothing is what builds everything up on its house of cards. And when we die, the mental masturbation stops. Life is over. Because it never even started. Even as we were born, we were running out the very second we were here. So, I don't know, in a strange, arbitrary fashion, only negative numbers exist. Because a conception of life, conception, when people fuck and they have sex or like whatever, yeah, conception, conceptualization, you know, it's just that. It's an idea, an idealization, it's a facade, it's a whatever. But nothing has nothing to hide, even if you catch it, even if you stare it blank in the face, or what is it that they say? You stay gaze into the abyss and then like, you know, it looks back. It's always looking, even if you don't want to acknowledge it or not. So I guess, yeah, sure. It's there if you look at it and it does in fact like look back. But truth be told, you always see it. I know you're not dumb enough to forget that you're going to die, for example. Unless maybe you are, but I know a lot of you aren't. So, you know, this life, it's a fucking lie. It's a fucking lie. There's no truth. There are even no lies, technically. And it all contradicts each other. Because so much negative numbers, so much positive numbers, all this crashes. Of course, the only thing that would lead up to our time on Earth and our experience based on kind of like what I said, sequences of events, would be nothing other than death. So, you know, you're worthless, you're useless, I'm worthless, I'm useless. Everything is garbage, everything is stupid. But you know what? Let's drink to it, because fuck it, why not? Fuck you, life. See you on the black end of the void. Even though we're already there. But I guess when we're dead, it's just going to be even clearer. But even when we hit that, we won't even know that because we're gone.